Ladies and gentlemen, fight fans all around the world, let's talk some boxing. So Spike TV featured premier boxing champions Berto versus Josesito Lopez and Sean Porter versus Eric Bonet. And I gotta tell you, man, the two fights ended in knockouts, okay? So there's nothing short of action. Now, everybody expected fireworks with Josesito Lopez versus Berto. Shout outs to Boxing Ego for his comments. I watched his video as well as I watched several other videos, and then I went and watched the fight itself. In the fight itself, I have to agree with Boxing Ego that Josesito Lopez won every round until he was stopped by Berto. But as I observed the fight, and actually made my comments on the fight, I thought that yes, Berto was getting hit by Josesito Lopez quite a lot, but I noticed also Josesito Lopez was getting damage, and the commentators actually talked about his damage he was receiving over the eye and on the top of his forehead. And as I looked at the fight, I started paying attention to what Berto was doing. And the difference between Berto and this fight, I have to say, and the Bertos of times past is, if you hit Berto, he would try and get you back immediately. In this fight, he was a lot more composed, and even though he wasn't blocking all the shots, he was getting into a defensive posture and tightening in the right places, so that the shots Josesito Lopez was hit him with, he was sort of rolling with them, and he was sort of buffeting them, okay? But the other thing I noticed was his jab. It was a significantly crisp, very sharp jab, and it was doing damage on Josesito Lopez to the extent that Josesito Lopez was pushing Berto back in the first round and part of the second round. And by the third round, Berto was the guy who was taking control, and he was pushing Josesito Lopez back. And the other interesting thing about Berto, and I heard it from his mouth, and I made my own observations myself, was his composure. He was very composed. He was breaking Josesito Lopez down. He was hitting him to the head and mostly to the body. He was doing that jab to the pit, was very successful. Then he started throwing some hooks, some uppercuts. And as Josesito Lopez started to slow down, Berto started to take up the pace of the game. Now, I made these comments before I even watched what Berto was saying. And Berto himself started confirming it, and what his coach was telling him. And much kudos to Virgil Hunter, because he began to realize, okay, we can start to pick up the pace, he's slowing down. I remember Floyd Mayweather Sr. saying the same thing to Floyd Mayweather Jr. in both Marcos Maidana fights. You have to break down your opponent, and that's exactly what Berto did to Josesito Lopez. Even though Josesito Lopez tried the strategy of Robert Guerrero and of Victor Ortiz. I noticed also the same thing Keith Thurman did to Robert Guerrero. He was wearing him down, sharpshooting on the outside and using the jab to the pit, which is a dangerous weapon used in boxing. It's almost indefensible, the jab to the pit. And that's why a lot of boxers, even the old-time greats, used to use it a lot. But of course, you can't use it all the time. You have to be unpredictable. You have to mix it up to the head, to the body. So I was really impressed with Berto's performance, seeing that he came off of a very long layoff from boxing. Only had one preparatory fight before this big fight. I was very impressed with him. I was also impressed with Adrian Broner, who also utilized that smart ring IQ, that intellectual boxing IQ. And you could tell that these guys had been schooled, they had been training for a good period of time to be able to break down their opponents. So I was very impressed with Berto's performance after watching it. In light of everything everyone else has been saying as fans, I've been looking at it technically from a boxing perspective. I want you guys to realize what Berto did also conforms to the videos I showed you on Jose Luis Castillo. This is what Jose Luis Castillo was trying to do to Floyd Mayweather, and he had some success with it. Castillo actually had a lot more success with his jab than Mayweather had with his jab. Even though Mayweather threw the jab much more often, Castillo was more precise with his jabs. He threw less jabs, but whenever he threw a jab, it was effective. And so when I say punches and bunches don't win you fights and heart don't win you fights, I meant what I said. Josesito Lopez was throwing a lot of punches and bunches. And he was mixing up the head and body shots as he ought to, but he wasn't effective, mainly because the punches that he was using weren't perfected punches, and they weren't as precise as they ought to have been against Andre Berto. It wasn't that Josesito Lopez wasn't the bigger, stronger fighter. It was that he was not the more precise, rehearsed fighter. Andre Berto did to Josesito more with his jab than Josesito did with his combinations to Andre Berto. It tells you that Andre Berto was practicing and learning and schooling, being schooled in a technique. So another thing that separates an elite fighter from a fighter that's good is their perfection, the perfection of techniques. Okay, the perfection of techniques. Go watch back that fight, Andre Berto versus Josesito Lopez. There's a lot to learn from that. You guys have a great day.